Everybody, as you can see, Reverend Kathy has joined me, and she and I are going to have a conversation on this Sunday morning. And I am so glad you're joining us for this conversation. And I am so grateful for for how Reverend Kathy has invited me into this center as a speaker from time to time, and to be part of this community. And so, it's especially wonderful for me to be with her on a Sunday morning. And so. Hello, Reverend Kathy, and I'm interested to have you launch what we're doing here today in our conversation.
Great. Well, thank you. And I really appreciate your willingness to be adventurous and do this with me. I was excited when you said yes. And, several of us, many of us in Butte County in particularly, are very aware that today, November 8th, is the anniversary of the campfire. And today, Reverend Andy and I agreed that we'd have a conversation about harvesting the spiritual lessons and reflections from the campfire, knowing that we're 2 years in the making since that time, and having an opportunity to have conversation. We first thought that we'd set context. I own now a lot in Paradise, but I owned a 2-bedroom, 1-bath or 2-bath rental in Paradise. And I will start by saying in context that even though I knew things looked very grave on that morning, I can tell you that I didn't believe that the fire would reach all the way down to the part of Paradise off of Foster that my rental was. But obviously knowing by hearing and experiencing what was going on, it did leave me wondering, like, wow, how can I really believe this will go that far? And Andy, I'll let you, Reverend Andy, speak a little bit to your history in Paradise and your situation with the campfire.
Well, I first moved to Paradise when I was 10 years old. My parents relocated. My dad worked for PG&E. So Paradise was my hometown. And then as I became an adult, I did a little bit of moving around, and I began to raise my children there, and then we made a move, and then there was a divorce in our family. And at some point, I decided to double back and raise my children up there, and I took them up there when they were 13, 10, and 7. So they were very much involved in school and high school and football games and all that stuff. And Judy and I set up our lives up there, and as the kids went on, and I changed jobs, I morphed into ministry and eventually took over the center up there. And so it not only became our hometown for our house and our home and our friends and all of that, but also our spiritual home. And so for me, it was, I don't know, it's hard for me to encapsulate what it means, because, it was the loss of, it was the loss of our home and our belongings. It was the loss of our center. It was kind of like it all got knocked out really in an interesting way. And on the day that it happened, I don't have the recollections that Kathy has. I think I really went into shock. And also Judy had a hard time getting out of town. And so, our day was consumed with that. So, but that's my context. And I carry Paradise in my heart, what I've known it to be. And so that's my context, and that's kind of the place I enter into this conversation.
So, here we are, and, every anniversary, of course, is a way to honor, no doubt, what was. And I think about the experience of that. Of course, I feel I'm still living it in the sense of still being a part of the PG&E settlement and having to still do paperwork. And I didn't record how many hours, but I basically said in the survey sent to the lawyers that go to the PG&E trust to determine the settlement that there's no way to make up for the hours in my life that I feel that I have spent trying to document and do what I need to do. Now, that's not to say, while I'm, that part of me might sound a little negative, because it is still frustrating and wanting to get through it and move beyond it. And yet at the same time, there's a whole lot of things to cultivate from any particular experience, especially as time goes by. And so I look back now and say, okay, what stays with me now about that particular day or the overall experience, and what changes when looking back, as far as processing. And again, um, my certainly having tenants that I had known for 14 years, and we had a great, relationship. They took great care of the place, and I have pictures that I have taken the before and after, and sort of use that as a way to just reflect. And I think that I don't think anybody who has feelings doubts that there is a lot of pain, suffering, and loss that happened in this circumstance in a lot of different ways. And there's many ways to look at this. I frequently use the facet of the diamond to say, yes, there's many perspectives to come at this particular event that you and I are sharing in the way that we're sharing here today, as well as 14,000 other people who well, more than 14,000 people, but 14,000 homes and
Yeah.
buildings being lost. And what does it mean to me? And, you know, I've been reading a lot of the Dalai Lama and really thinking about the fact that it is interesting that we have lots of expectations and that
Yeah.
we get very attached to those expectations.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, the lesson is that the things that are here that we see and that we touch are not the things that last forever.
Yeah.
And boy, is that real. The love, the peace, the joy, that's really what goes on beyond the tangible here. And therefore, when I do my spiritual practice, I was just doing a meditation last night with the practitioner students about basically just hanging out in the blue sky. And what is it like to just feel in the blue sky, free, and not per se attached or having expectations of particular form.
Yeah.
That's sort of some of what I've been reflecting on. How about you?
Yeah, it's really interesting. First of all, I think that as human beings, there's a quote that we were created from the earth and we are created from the stars. And I love that because we are connected to this earth and we are connected to this home. And if you take the DNA of the trees, you take the DNA of us, we're so closely related. But we are of the stars, which gives us that way of being the observer. And shortly after we went through this, Judy and I were living in Las Molinas in a camping trailer. And, I can't begin to tell you how many times one of us said to the other, well, we're in the practice of non-attachment. And that's what you were talking about, the Dalai Lama and Buddhism. And, what it is, it's all, there's no permanence. It's all, it's all ephemeral. And so what we had was we had each other and we had our memories and we had our tears and we had our frustrations and we had our anxieties and we had our hopes and we had our dreams and then we had our challenges and I found a great deal of comfort in that about the idea of non-attachment. That I felt like there was an opportunity here, and I'll kind of get into that later. But I think that my experience with loss in a lot of different ways, because we all experience it. I don't think it's as clean and black and white. And when you're talking, I'm really hearing that. And your realization of that is that, 2 years later, or whatever, I may slip into some grief and anger and then joy and then resentment and good memories and longing and all in one day. And to be able to, be aware of it and empty out and take that in and know that there's some gifts of healing there,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's the
I
thing.
love what you said about those people, your tenants and that relationship, because those relationships are what just seem to like vaporize. And I don't mean I mean suddenly there's people in Arizona and Hawaii and Sacramento and it's just like, oh my God.
Yeah, everybody everywhere, right?
Yeah.
Sounds like a Barney song, everybody everywhere.
Right for Sesame Street.
The Dalai Lama in the Book of Joy talked about it's normal to experience difficulties. I mean, We don't want to think about our life like that, but the difficulties come up for us. But then these can be experiences with the right way of thinking that lead you to have great inner strength.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
sort of like polishing a rock, or again going back to the diamond, things can shine in new light, in new ways of looking at things, and figuring out. For me, the spiritual philosophy, science of mind, and meditation give me a place to reflect, to meditate, and to savor life.
Mhm. Yeah.
And if I wasn't in a spiritual philosophy that allowed me that, I'm wondering how much of life could I be savoring if it's just go, 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 do, 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 and then one day
Yeah.
I'm done.
Yeah.
So while
Wow,
nobody,
that fire was an opportunity to savor. It really was. Because oh wow, that's amazing.
for so many people,
Yeah.
like you said, paradise is a special place. I mean, not just the name. It
Yeah.
was a special place for, many people know of the place. And I can't tell you, of course, we're all interconnected, how many people had relatives or friends they knew in
Yeah.
paradise,
Yeah.
and what kind of connection that created, which sort of, I may be launching a little too soon, but about the future, I feel like, wow, those of us that were here experienced a little more of the wildfires that, of course, we have experienced this year.
Yeah.
Of course, they're predicting further.
Yeah.
And, what does that mean, as far as having been in this experience on an edge where the whole
Yeah.
world knew that the town of Paradise in this
Yeah.
particular circumstance? So, as far as awareness, visibility, hopefully raising an awareness of climate change,
Yeah.
sustainability. I mean, I said to my partner, yeah, I'd rebuild the house if we knew exactly how we could build it. Where, I have never lived in Florida, but
Mhm.
I know that when a hurricane comes, that you prepare.
Yeah.
When a wildfire comes, you don't stay, you leave,
Yeah. Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
very different experience.
Well,
And
it's interesting, the savoring part of it. And I appreciate that you're stepping forward, and I don't want to give us whiplash, but the savoring part of it, that I was heading to Reading the morning that I got news that we could, those who lived in Paradise could go back in. So I turned my car around and I went up there, and because of the way our day was scheduled, Judy couldn't go up there with me, so I went up there alone. I went up there to our lot and to our home. First of all, when I got into town, I just began to cry, which I didn't anticipate. I got up there and I was looking at our lot, and there was a part of me. And so what I said was, I thanked it for being our home. And I said, I'm sorry I wasn't here for you. And I took out my cell phone and I got Judy on the cell phone, and I put her on speakerphone, and I said, Judy, is there anything you want to say? And so
wow.
we both spoke to that place that was our home, and it was our way to savor, and it was our way to thank it. And I'm a big believer in that. And so that was what was honoring what was, and that's the savoring. Um, you know, I'm so glad that as human beings, we're wired with the capability to give deep thanks and gratitude and savor what is. You just brought that word forward, and I want to thank you for that.
Well, it's a beautiful connection, because you were mentioning that honoring what was a beginning for you on uh, a personal spiritual practice that wasn't necessarily like a formal spiritual
Yeah,
practice, but that was the first step. Yes.
yeah, yeah. As all we go to conferences, and we read books, and we go hear masters, and we attend different philosophies and their ideas, and there's these ceremonies, celebrations, practices, and there's drumming and everything. We're kind of taught how to do it. And what I found, starting with that thing with the cell phone, uh, I did a spiritual practice. Judy and I both did, and it was just our spiritual practice, and it means the world to me. And I've integrated it now into my life, where when I go I went to the ocean recently, and when I left, I thanked the ocean. I honored it. I honored the few days I was there, and
Mm.
and it's really brought. I just find myself, when I'm moving away from something, or there's any form of loss or transition at all, I want to take the time to honor it. I mean, that's what we do when we celebrate the life of human beings, and it brings richness to my life to honor where I've lived and where I visited, and again, savoring. That's beautiful. It really
Yeah,
is.
love that. Um, let's see, one of the things that painful experiences, and this comes now from law of attraction rather than Dalai Lama, so bringing in a lot of different spiritual practices here. What does contrast bring to us? And that's part of the savoring and honoring that you're talking about too.
Mhm.
In other words, we get stretched, and that's how we know that our muscles are getting stronger. We stretch them and then they get stronger. And I think that's true mentally, especially now being in COVID, working on mental immunity and mental strength based on where we are. And then also, as far as what the contrast brings now is whenever there are these experiences, saying, now, how do I want to create going forward?
Mhm.
Meaning, if the house that I invested in was still there, I wouldn't be asking this question. But
Yeah.
once I can, and as you said earlier, emotions come and go, and sometimes they're, happy, sad, grateful, and then the next minute it might be grief.
Yeah.
But I'm also honoring the fact that now I get to choose how to create to go forward, and
Mhm.
that there are still unlimited possibilities, just as there were when it was standing, but
Yeah.
certainly now. And then asking myself, so how do I want to lean in and create going forward?
Yeah. I think I've been reading a book by Jonathan Hammond called The Shaman's Mind. I'm in it for the second time right now. And he talks about shapeshifting in terms of bringing it into our consciousness. And he says that a shapeshifter inhabits the place of audacity and curiosity.
Hmm.
And I think that moving forward as individuals, where then shall we build, or where then shall we live, or how shall we live? And I really want to say this, honoring all those who have lost, like you said, not only the paradise some years ago, but now it's like there are so many. I mean, I walk around town and I see so many fire T-shirts, I mean, of all these fires. And so I want to show up for people and honor the grief or the sadness. But in terms of moving forward, I mean, what strikes me is, how then shall I live in terms of individually on this planet, and this planet I love so much because I am of the earth, and also how shall we live? And I think that I like to think of the idea of being grateful for the opportunity to evolve through intention. I was talking to a client where I work now, and we were talking about walking through the fire. That's interesting. And so we walk through the fire, and on the other side of the fire, from a psychological or spiritual point of view, is on the other side of the fire is a realization.
Mm.
And, God, according to Ernest Holmes, and I believe this, God doesn't wear a black hat or a white hat. God is that power, that energy, and says, yes, my beloved, it is done unto you, whatever you want to do with that. And I think that we have to remember how powerful we are as beings, as spiritual beings, to create. And I am really super aware of what is the West that I want to help create. I'm talking about from the Rockies West, which is this place that you're talking about, and the Pacific Northwest, and throughout. We're seeing things happen, and to our brothers and sisters who are the polar bears and other beings, and the whales and everything. And I'm becoming very aware of that, and I just with I think it was in Star Trek. With great power comes great responsibility,
Mm.
and
Mm.
we together at some level. I want to say this very carefully. Our consciousness has brought us to the place to where the earth is trying desperately to survive and to handle what's happening. And because of that, things are changing. And we, being intelligent beings, have to take stock of that. And that's what religious science wants us to do. That's what the
Yeah.
Dalai Lama wants us to do. That's what, and I want to live better. I want to live. I want to live mindfully. I want to live awareness, and that speaks to what you're saying.
Yeah, that's
You know.
beautiful. And the Dalai Lama's book, An Appeal to the World, is like he wants to drop his cloak as don't think of me as, coming from a certain religion, but that humanity, we must come together. And, I'm constantly reminded that the earth is going to go on, whether we as humans are going to listen to the messages that it's trying to deliver to us. And then again, how we want to choose to, I like that shapeshifter. Is that what you called it? Shapeshifter?
Yeah. Shapeshifting.
And that, how do we want to shapeshift together and become more intentional? Meaning that, we all right now still live in a very beautiful place, and not taking that for granted as you're speaking, and remembering that we are, we get to choose, we get to place our intention, we get to come together in unity about placing our intention, which even in this common experience of what was called the campfire, lots of intention is being spoken about. People are still communing to rebuild paradise, and to frankly, again, with the communities that are having to experience, unfortunately, the same set of experiences, how it's in some ways it's building a consciousness to become much more aware than we have before. And I know one of the things I wanted to also mention is, in the Science of Mind textbook, page 187, never limit your view of life by any past experience. And I've taken that quote a couple different ways, in the sense of we frequently will react. And now in the case of where we stand, how will we, instead of react, become proactive to choose again with intention how we want to create going forward? And also of any past experience, that regardless of what experience has happened, again, going back to the sky as a metaphor, we are still free to choose, still that there's unlimited possibilities. And how do we want to come together, especially during this time, whether we're talking about the elections, whether we're talking about COVID, whether we're talking about, again, rebuilding paradise, there is a common theme here of spirit asking us, how do we want to come together in unity and with intention create going forward?
You're talking about Ernest Holmes, and I got a quote for today's conversation. He says, in the Science of Mind textbook, he says, the imagination is creative. A good psychological balance is struck when the will and the emotions are right and poised. And to me, it speaks of yin and yang and the balance that our will and our emotions have got to come together. And it speaks to what you're saying. We do live in a beautiful place, and we can have emotions about it. But now we have to begin to become clear-headed and poise those emotions in the will. And I love that, And he says, when we do that, it is the very breath of our breath, which is the imagination of our word, coming back to our consciousness and what, the state of our healing, the state of our planet, the state of our own lives, it is in the hands of consciousness,
And an invitation. I think, the invitation is showing up in different ways.
Yeah. Yeah.
Come together. Yeah. Well, it's been wonderful to have this time with you, Reverend Andy. And again, I can't thank you enough for being willing to do this and have this.
Thank you. This has been a real pleasure.
Yeah. All right. I'll let you move forward in our service, and thank you again. And we'll be talking to you soon. Namaste.
You too. Namaste. Thank you so much, Kathy.